right, guys, welcome back to another episode of Designing the Best You. Now, we are in our last episode of this series of childhood wounds and how they affect you in the workplace. Well, basically life, right? And we did take last week off, and it wasn't for any specific reason. It was a reason. I turned 40. Okay, I turned 40 and I wanted a break, first of all. And a lot of things are brought up in this whole childhood wound series. As much as I speak about it, as much as healing and stuff that I've personally done, and I work with clients on this as well, it still does affect me after all these years. And so I have to take a break. And I encourage you guys, when you do have feelings, and like I talk about my kids' big feelings, take a break. Do what you can to get in nature. We went to Rocky Mountain National Park and it was beautiful. Oh my goodness, it was beautiful. And it just kind of took the edge off. So we are back at it though, and ready to rock and roll on this fourth wound. Okay, the fourth wound being trust. Okay, so were you often let down or betrayed by those closest to you, maybe including your parents, your family, extended family, friends, spouse? Like those continuous letdowns are like what I like to call raindrops, batting, right? Just hitting up against a wooden wood sill. Okay, they're going to leave a deep mark over time, right? It's the constant. In the complex PTSD world, right, it's complex because it happens ongoing, nonstop, and it builds these deep wounds, okay? And so that deep wound, I like to call, is that trust wound. And as I've said, all of them are pretty intense. All the ones we've talked about, go back and listen to previous episodes. But this one it's a different kind of deep, okay? It gets in the way of, gets in the way of being able to feel vulnerable with someone else, okay? Being unable to trust someone, whether it's a spouse, a coworker, a manager, a parent, any of those people, it might stem from a lack of, most of the time it does stem from a lack of attachment during childhood. Some people like to say it's from a person's character. I choose to beg to differ because, for example, in my own childhood, my mother has said that her mom told her not to hold me. So I was a cry it out baby, as many of you probably were. And the tough part about that is we are designed to be attached to our parents, especially our mother. And when we get pushed away or left alone, I won't even go deep into that because we have gone into that on other episodes, but it's huge. So how does it really, like the trust wound, oops, I lost place my notes, really come out? As I'm pulling up some notes here because I want to make sure I hit a few points here for you today. So, so much of the wounds come from how we were raised, right? Many of us had good parents. Many of us had good family. Many of us have had good relationships, and many of us haven't. There's always some kind of trust issues. There's always some kind of neglect, and it's all about the person's perspective. But if it's a constant thing, it really is abuse or trauma, okay? And children who have experienced, or if their children now are experiencing, ongoing emotional, physical, verbal, sexual trauma are going to develop deeper trust wounds than people experiencing those same type of traumas, okay? Because kids, as I see in my own and I see in other people's kids, have highly impressionable, underdeveloped minds, okay? So as we've talked about, trauma can affect anyone. I mean, there's things that you never expected as an adult, and then it happens like in the workplace or in a church or wherever it is, and you're like, that was traumatic, and I have to heal from that. I don't want to say it's easier because it's not easier, but children have that underdeveloped mind, so they're putting their trust in you if you're a parent. Sorry, I'm getting a little emotional here, but they're putting that trust in you as a parent. And when you break that trust, oh man. We all say we're going to do things and don't do things. But to a child, when you say, you're going to do something, you don't do it, it hurts, right? And so people who have been severely abused, mistreated, or lied to frequently, and I say frequently, we've all been lied to, but frequently by that same person, no apologies or anything like that, they're going to develop those trust wounds. And that's the tough part. And many people experience hurt and the violation at those, and violation at the expense, at the hands of those they felt were trustworthy. I do believe deep down most parents don't have that intention to hurt their kids, but because they have unresolved, as we talked about, unresolved healing and trauma wounds of their own. For example, even my parents, yes, my mother went through counseling, as she said, for the physical abuse and verbal and emotional abuse that her alcoholic mother gave her. She still has issues with it, right? And the same thing with my father, did not go to counseling as far as I know, and thought everyone was against him. And because he had trust issues, because he had abandonment, neglect, he was hurt so bad, it doesn't give you the right to hurt anyone. But yeah, I won't go into more of that, but people experience, sadly, let me back up here. Sadly, once that trust, has been broken, it's so hard to repair. Any of you guys who have been adults and you've experienced infidelity, right? Your spouse has cheated on you in some manner, abused you in some manner, like getting that trust back is hard. Imagine a child who has gone through their whole life, and that child could be you, a child who's gone through their whole life in that abuse and dealing with that trauma. How hard is it for you to trust someone? You go into the workplace, and how hard is it for you to trust someone, right? I know that's, even with external help, it's still hard. It's a toughie, right? It's hard. I've never told you guys that the work that I've done or the work that I do with you is easy. Parts of it might be simple, but it is hard. You guys come to me because you're done, you're exhausted, you're like, what now? I've tried all the things. And children who were lied to, often by their parents, those people typically grow up into adults who struggle to trust others. Think about it. It's natural. It really is a natural reaction as their primary caretakers. Those who, the primary caretakers being those who a child should be able to blindly trust. You come out of the womb and you're like, someone's here to take care of me, and this is what they're supposed to do, is take care of you, right? But those caretakers fail to display any kind of sincerity. And it sucks, to be honest. It really does. And as a parent myself, I strongly believe in being open and honest with my boys about everything. Age appropriate, of course. But if they ask a question about something they heard or they saw, we talk about it. We don't lie. I mean, they've heard and seen things. They say, what's the thing they now talk about is skibbity toilet, which is, look it up if you want. To me, kind of dumb. Not kind of, really dumb. But we had to sit and talk about it. Like, they're saying it, so you're saying it. We're not going to lie about it or say like, oh, okay, just don't say it, whatever. We had to look into it. Or Sigma. We had to look into it, and we had to put a biblical, not biblical spin on it, but we had to say, okay, what is biblical about this? If it's biblical, okay, great, you can use it, but this is how you're going to use it. We're not going to lie to them. Or if they saw something that, we did or said or heard something we said, sometimes I'm human, I swear, and then they'll say it, and I'm like, okay, it's not do what mommy says, not what you know the phrase, right? So, for example, let's go to a client example. That last year, he said he had his mom. What happened was she would take him. His parents, they were always really, really tense with each other. They weren't separated at that time, but they were still together. But she would take him to the store. They would say they were going like grocery shopping or going out or doing whatever, and she'd stop at a store, and she would say, "Now don't say anything to your father." How many of you guys have heard that? Father, mother, whatever. And what does that do to a child? It says, oh, it's okay to hide things. And as we uncovered his story last year, we found he hid so much in his childhood, his teenage, his adult life, And it affected relationships, it affected his career, it affected his marriage, it affected things with his family, and that stinks, right? It stinks. And when he was a child and that was said to him, and his father would be like, well, where did this come from? And would ask him, well, you were with your mom. What kind of situations that put a child in? Well, I love my mom and I love my dad. Like, who do I lie for and to, right? And so it creates all kinds of trust issues. And then as he got older, he was like, I don't even know if what she's saying is true these days at almost 50 years old. And that's hard, right? And so trust wounds, they not only make it impossible to trust others, it also makes these trust wound victims, we'll say, shy away from showing any vulnerability, right? It's like they're cold, right? They're cold. And it really does stem from the fear that others are going to take advantage of them. And they're going to see their vulnerability as a weakness. How many of you guys are like, I don't want to open up at work because it's going to be a weakness? Now, there's a line as to what you should share, but to hold back so much, and what that does too is it causes all kinds of health issues that we talked about, right? And you got to remember too that people with trust issues, those trust wounds, okay, were likely let down by people they trusted. So they don't put their faith in anyone anymore as a way to protect themselves against that hurt. And I know I was one of those. I still can be some days. Like, I don't want to put my trust. Sometimes I don't even want to put my trust in someone planning a trip for me or planning a meal out. It can be that extreme, to be honest with you. It's like you don't want to because you're afraid of they're going to let you down or they're going to hurt someone, themselves or you. And it's crazy. And so, right, from that health standpoint, we'll touch on that because we're a health and career podcast. That health standpoint, they take on everything, right? They just keep taking on everything themselves. So like, I can't trust anyone else. I've always had to do it anyways. I've gotten through it. And then you have gut issues, you have adrenal issues, you have thyroid issues, you have all kinds of hormone stuff going on. You have minerals depleted because you are so stressed and worn out. You've built like calcium shells, we call it, around every single cell, and you can't let anything in and you can't let anything out. And then you become this cold and depressed and just blah person. And because you can't trust anyone, right? And you can't settle down either, right? You can't sit still. It's not an ADHD thing. It's not a, what do I want to call it? Anyways, it was on the tip of my tongue. But what happens, you end up having a lot of sleep issues. You end up being more stressed. I wear a Whoop. If anyone is interested, I have a link in the comments for a discount on it. And I can see when I have trust issues or I have any of these childhood wound things come up or I'm triggered, I have more stress at night when I'm sleeping than I do during the day. So trust is a serious thing. Now, we're going to have people fail us. We're human, okay? I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm saying we're human. But when we end up shutting people out and we fail to show any of that vulnerability, what happens? Okay, it makes it difficult for us to connect with people because our caregivers didn't teach us how to connect. They just taught us to, here, we're going to separate by lying. We're going to separate by, neglecting you, abandoning you, all those different things, right? And you want a meaningful relationship, but you hurt so much you don't quite know how to have a good relationship. It's this vicious cycle, right? And at some point you got to break it, right? You think in your head, and let me know if this is you, okay? You think, will it be this time that they care for me? Will it be this time that my boss notices all that I've done? Will it be this time? This was a big one for me last week. Will it be this time that they celebrate my birthday genuinely? Can I trust that they're going to remember or even know what I want and what I like and what I don't? Will it be this time that they're going to show me all of the bank and credit card statements and own up for their mistakes? Will it be this time that I can go through their phone with them, right? Not secretly, again, that's a trust issue, but go through the phone with me and check their messages and their phone calls so they're not going to, they're not with that person, right? They did what they said they were going to do. That, on and on and on. And so it's all these fears that come up with the trust wounds. So many fears. And I'm going to list them off for you, okay? And so let me know if these are some fears that you have. And again, as I list these things off, it doesn't make you a good or a bad person. You just are. You've just experienced these things, okay? And I'm going to give you, as I have for the last few episodes, I'm going to give you some steps as to what to do to heal this wound, okay? So when you have the trust wound, you have a fear of rejection. How many of you guys in the job search right now, you're like, I don't even want to send out another resume. I don't even want to take another phone call because I'm just going to get rejected. I'm going to get to the fourth round and I'm just going to get rejected. Now, if you back up and you think about that logically, one person wins out of thousands of people who apply for the job. It could be you, it could be someone else, right? But when you have that fear of rejection, you have a fear of abandonment, it leads to a hesitancy, right? Not only like in doing something like a job search, performing that and going through the whole process, but it leads to a hesitancy in forming deep connections. And when you have this type of fear of rejection, you tend to believe that others are going to let you down. They're going to leave you. And that makes it difficult to trust them. How many of you guys don't trust a company because they don't have a job search process or an onboarding process that you like? Did that hit? And I'm not trying to put you down in any way, but just think about that. Because you have a fear, okay? Or here's another fear, is a fear of intimacy. And this isn't just spousal intimacy, okay? But that can be, if you've had issues with that, you have a mother wound or a father wound, and there's that trust issue. Intimacy it leads to a fear of rejection too, that fear of intimacy. People with trust issues avoid connecting on a deeper level because they're like, why? Because when I go deep, it's not going to matter anyways. They're just going to keep hurting me. So why? Right? And so they push away when I see a lot in women. I'm not saying it doesn't happen in men, but women are a little bit more open about it when we get into the work that I do. When you've been emotionally and verbally and sexually abused, you lose trust in that person. And then you also lose trust, even though you may be in a good relationship, you lose trust in a person who might have some similar qualities or traits or do some things that trigger that are the same. Same thing at work, right? So just be aware of that, okay? Then you also could have a fear of abandonment. A strong fear of abandonment can make it so difficult to trust others. And people with this type of fear are typically jealous. They question everything their partner says. They question what their boss says and does. They could also worry excessively about their relationships. And it makes them very suspicious. And I will be open and honest and vulnerable here. And I said, I used to do that when, as you guys know, the story of our marriage and how my husband was dealing with substances, I was very, very skeptical of everything that was done, said, not done, like everything. And I was worrying excessively. And on the opposite end, he was worrying excessively about me leaving and taking the kids and doing it. Anytime we go somewhere or don't say that we're doing something or forget, right? I'm human, forget doing something or saying something. It's a fear. And it takes a lot of work. And I lost my train of thought. I love when that happens. But what they do, there it is. What they do is when you have that fear of abandonment, you sit there and say, well, is this time, am I going to be able to trust them this time? They're going to the same place. They're doing the same activity. They're hanging out with that same person or a similar person. Are they trustworthy now? And yeah, well, we'll go into the how-tos later. I started getting ahead of myself there, but you also might have some overprotective feelings. People with trust issues feel the need to be overprotective, or people who experience their overprotective feelings say they're controlling of themselves, of others around them. Typically, if you're like a parent, it's of your kids. If you're at work, it's the projects that you do. And they always imagine the worst possible outcome, okay? And so you start to get defensive maybe about people and processes because you've had feelings attached to that. Maybe you've been rejected so many times by the job search process that you're like, you want to control it, okay? And when someone brings something up or challenges you with a question, you get very defensive about it. And that's your overprotective feelings of trust, okay? Because you don't trust the process. You don't trust the people who are involved in the process because they're just like everyone else, right? And so you also can have a fear of being avoidant to commitments. How many of you guys have committed to a date, you've committed to an event, a social outing, going out for coffee, whatever it is, only to cancel at the last minute? Yeah, I have. I bet you have too. If I have, you have too. And it's because the trust, you're like, oh my gosh, am I going to get to build a new relationship like I really want to? Am I going to, I'm going to experience something new. Maybe you're trying a new hobby and you're like, I want to, I know I need to, but I'm afraid to. And then you stop and you don't do it. That's that fear of avoidant to commitments because you've committed to things in the past and people have not been there for you. I don't know how many times my father would say when I was in the workforce, I'm going to come hang out with you for lunch. I'm going to take you to lunch, blah, blah, blah. And then last minute, like, right, I wouldn't bring a lunch to work, anything like that. I learned. And he would call or he wouldn't show up and I'd be like, now what? I'm hungry, or I'd have to go out last minute, or I'd have to leave work early because I didn't take a lunch break. So then I started keeping things in my drawer and in the refrigerator just in case. And it was always happened. And it was frustrating because I couldn't trust that he was going to do what he said he was going to do. Everyone else was more important. And I bet you guys have had that too. So you avoid those commitments, okay? You might also have feelings that friends or families or colleagues are going to leave you hanging at a crucial moment. Maybe they're supposed to be up on stage with you. Maybe they're supposed to be with you at a meeting or a negotiation or a closing of a deal. And they're maybe notorious for not, or they just... I had that actually with a boss in my first job, my first like corporate job. And he said he purposely didn't show up because he knew I could handle it. Now, I was depending on him being there, just being there, not helping me and talking me through it or talking for me, but just being there. And by him, first of all, not communicating that that's what he was doing, I had that fear and I'm like, okay. And now, moving forward all these years, I was like, nope, I can't trust anyone. Nope, not at all. Nope. You say you're going to show up, don't even bother. And that created a more calcium around my cells, by the way, hardened. And it also created a lot of not so deep relationships. And that's what happens, right? You might have a predisposition, which is kind of like what I was just talking about, predisposition or discrimination against people who seem, quote, untrustworthy. Maybe someone looks like someone who is untrustworthy to you. You couldn't trust it. Maybe someone has the same car. Maybe someone was in the same role or whatever that was. And then you're like, nope, I can't even. All right. It happens. I mean, you guys, I'm sitting here and laughing about it and that type of stuff. And I'm sharing this stuff and deep down that that's you. And maybe you have a fear too of, like I said, just at the beginning of this fear section, you have fear of exploring new friendships, new activities, business opportunities. Even me just moving, I'm like, okay, I want to get connected. And because we're in month like 2.5 here. Was that? Yeah, 2.5. And I've had people reach out and like, hey, let's go grab coffee. And I'm like, oh, but you know what? I homeschool now. And hey, you know what? But my husband got home late, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, Vanessa, stop. Like, you are having this fear of exploring new relationships because you don't know what's going to happen. But also, I don't know what's going to happen. And it could be a good thing. And so I've had to catch myself even in it. But knowing what I know and knowing my triggers and knowing August is never a good month for me, and I'm working through that, as you guys probably have your own month around maybe a certain holiday, a certain anniversary, birthday, things like that, okay? So here's the big part. How do you know for sure you have a trust wound? I'm going to list a few things off quickly. Inability to trust people. You're afraid of any sort of thought or commitment, okay? You always have your guard up. You're feeling guilty when a person trusts you and puts in a lot of effort and you don't want to let them down, okay? You have fear of getting hurt by people or circumstances. You maybe feel like, not maybe, almost all the time, you feel like people are out to get you. You have this extreme paranoia and anxiety that arises from uncertainty. Y'all, none of us know about tomorrow. None of us know about the next hour, 2 hours, whatever it is, okay? You have a lack of trust in the future. You're afraid of taking risks, however big or small. You have negative thinking. Positive, I don't want to say positive feedback always has skepticism with it, always. And you don't like leadership roles. You might be in them because you're like, hey, it's the money, okay, whatever. But you don't want to pursue them. People keep saying you should be in the leadership roles, but you're like, nope, because you have a trust wound, okay? So there's also some beliefs that we have deep down, and I want you guys to explore those that arise from the trust wound. So having this gaping trust wound, basically, it can seem that, like I said, it can seem as if the whole world is out to get you, right? And no one deserves to be trusted, right? But unfortunately, that's an illusion. And it misguides you, okay? So for example, if a person with a trust wound enters a romantic relationship with a decent person, they may constantly fear their partner, their person they're dating is going to hurt them. And the fear doesn't stem, as we know this, and it's funny, we know this, fear doesn't stem from logic. It's from the trust wound, it's from the feelings, right? The body keeps score, it's from the feelings in our body, okay? But these untreated wounds or unresolved trauma may hurt, they do hurt. Let's just be real. They do hurt our present day relationships and destroy our mental well-being. Sorry, I have a little bit of a fog in my throat. So I don't want you to shy away from any help. Okay, if you're having physical symptoms that are overwhelming, if you've got emotional stuff that's overwhelming, like reach out to myself, reach out to other people you might know who have experience in that. And I will tell you, if you reach out to me and I don't have the experience that you need, I will find someone. I always do, okay? Because I don't want anyone left abandoned, right? Or neglected. I don't. Okay, so, and if I forget to get back to you, please give me some grace and reach out to me again, okay? So don't shy away. So, but people with the trust wound, you're going to find yourselves thinking things like, oh, they can't be trusted. And there's no basis for any of that, right? This isn't going to work. I can't see this thing turning out well. They're just going to let me down like everyone else has. And it's just a matter of time before something goes wrong. Think about that. Have you ever consciously or subconsciously said those things to yourself? I have. Okay. So, you think about it more in the workplace. Trust issues, they manifest in a number of ways. And I'll just include a couple of things here because we've talked about a few throughout this episode, but there's decreased productivity because you're just, I can't trust anyone. I don't want to work with anyone, just me. And anyone who's worked in production, you have to work together as a team. One person can't do as much as a team, right? There's changes in communication. There's siloed teams. There's stifled creativity, which I hate. Oh my gosh, think out of the box, right? And there's low morale, okay? It's survival mode all over the place, right? You're looking around for someone who's actually going to stand up for you. It's not trusting others to make good decisions or be a part of the team because maybe one day in childhood you worked on a team and you had to do it all yourself and you still failed, right? And at the same time, it's not trusting ourselves to let other people in. It's basically you want to hide out at work. You get the free coffee in the lunchroom and go and get a paycheck and go home. And it limits so much of our potential, guys. And so I want to give you a couple things of how you can heal from the trust wound. And I know it's easier said than done. So give yourself grace, compassion, time, and be patient, okay? So first, I want you to express your feelings, share them. I don't care if you write them down in a journal. I don't care if you speak to a close friend, a therapist, call me up, whatever it is. Share your concerns and your feelings, okay? And then here's a big one. Take small steps. I know you guys are very driven. You're tenacious. You want to get things done. You have these checklists. You want to do big things, but take small steps. The trust didn't get lost overnight. Take small steps to rebuild that trust gradually, okay? And then prioritize this trust. Model trustworthiness and prioritize that trust in the workplace, in the relationships, okay? Give people, here's a big one too, and I struggle with this still to this day, but give people a chance. Give others an opportunity to change. They're not going to be on the same timeline as you, and you're not going to be on the same timeline as them. It may take them 5 years to get to the changes that you want to see, and you have to be okay with that, okay? And then seek to understand. I tell this to clients, I tell this to family members so much, is seek to understand before they understand you, okay? Seek to understand them before they understand you. Practice forgiveness, but don't demand it, okay? Practice it yourself. Try to forgive, but don't demand it, okay? It's for me and any other Christian, it's biblical. We are told we need to forgive as Christ forgives us, okay? So practice that. Communicate effectively. Effective communication is so important for trust and intimacy and understanding, okay? That's huge. Embrace the vulnerability. When you can acknowledge that your mistakes can help build trust and show that you trust yourself, wow, okay? I remember when I was first going through all this and moving all over the place and whatnot, and my counselor said at that time, be open, honest, and vulnerable to everyone you meet. Because first of all, it would heal myself. Second of all, it was going to allow others to trust me because I was open and honest, and it might nudge them to be open and honest and vulnerable about what they have done in terms of our relationship and or in other relationships with people they have, okay? And then practice. My counselor says, God knows how many times, and sometimes I hate it, but as I'm going through the healing journey and I have clients going through the healing journey, practice self-compassion. It can only help heal from trauma, and it's such a powerful, powerful antidote to shame. Don't shame yourself, okay? Don't shame yourself. And I have a quote here I'm going to pull up, but I don't know where I got it from. So if you know who wrote this, please let me know so I can update it. But it says, I have come to accept the feeling of not knowing where I'm going, and I have trained myself to love it, because it's only when we are suspended in midair with no landing in sight that we force our wings to unravel and, alas, begin our flight. Like, whoa, right? So our ability to trust is so critical to our capacity for manifesting ease and flow in our lives. And during a difficult time in my life, I asked God. When you ask God something, you're going to get an answer at some point. You're going to get a feeling, you're going to get prompting. But each time when I have a difficult time, but this specific time I asked God, I said, what am I meant to be learning in this? And I heard trust and surrender. And I'm like, okay, right? But that meant being open and honest to myself, to accept myself and others exactly as they were, and just kind of loosen that grip of judgment and doubt, and open up a space for curiosity and play. So many of us are so serious at work, and we got to get a job, we got to make money, we got to move on up the ladder and got to be successful. Why not be successful in curiosity and play? I speak that one out loud to myself, by the way. So what I want you to do is realize that these wounds that we've talked about and resulting coping strategies can definitely impact our ability to trust ourselves, others, God, as I mentioned earlier in this episode. And it's our job to kind of make space for trust and surrender, okay? Trust that you're going to be able to move on. Trust that this is an experience, a chapter, a set of chapters in your book, maybe a sequel is coming. But I want you to list out some possible limiting beliefs that are holding you back, okay? Think about some of these might be, and I'm just going to list some of the ones I hear from myself and from others. I'm not enough. Trusting others is just naive. I'll never get it right. Those I trust always betray me. And the only person I can trust is myself. I've gotten myself through. And when those beliefs come up, and I encourage you to say them out loud, when those beliefs come up, notice how your body is reacting. Notice what kind of emotions. Do you start to cry? Do you start to get angry? Do you start to get passionate? Notice where the energy is in your body. Notice the tension. Do you have like do your hips get sore? Does your back hurt? Does your neck? Does your jaw clench up? Those type of things, okay? And you want to be able to now bring healing to your younger self. I know it's hard, but a lot of this stuff did happen as we were young. We don't want to revisit that, but we need to. The only way that we're going to heal is to go through it. And whether you have a specific memory or not, just imagine that your current self is entering that space where your young self was learning that it wasn't safe to trust themselves or others or the world in general. And let them know that you're there as an ally. And say anything that might have been helpful for them to hear at that time, like, it's not your fault. And even though it feels personal, it has nothing to do with you. And they were maybe this is a big one too, and this is something I had to say to myself is, you know what? They were like this long before you were born. I love you and you're not alone. You are perfect exactly how you are. You are not too much. You are exactly who you're supposed to be. And when you tell yourself those things, maybe even you can tell yourself that it was really smart of you to develop the beliefs and coping strategies so that you can make sense of what was happening to yourself. Right? These are some simple things that you can go through. And I can go on and on about some different strategies, but I want you to envision a new life. Like, envision yourself right now stepping into a new life, a new belief. We are transformed. When we're in the Christian faith, we're transformed. The old self is gone and the new is here. And I want you to think about, in as much detail as possible, like, what areas of your life, stepping into that new life with this new belief of yourself, like, what is work like? What are relationships like? What's health like? How does that feel in your body? And so on. Just and keep doing that until you're satisfied, right? And do it day after day after day. And I want to leave you guys today. Usually I leave you guys with here, check out the notes and stuff like that. But I had a poem, and again, oh gosh, where did I get this from? I will put it in the show notes. But this poem I found was really good on trust, and I wanted to share it with you. Trust is allowing our heart to rule our actions. Trust is letting go of the fantasy of how things should be. It's the deep knowing that things are exactly as they're meant to be, and there's no other way. Trust is the jellyfish dance of opening and contracting, of the testing the boundaries, being self and other, of honoring our true yes and no. So thank you for joining me on this set of episodes that we've endured this series, and I look forward to helping you to keep designing the best you. See you next week.